Hello and welcome to yet another of our streams. Well, not just yet another, that's not a true statement because today we have a very special thing. First of all, well, there were no streams on Wednesday normally at this hour. But yeah, here we are today. And it's special also for another reason because this is an interview with our very special guest, Edward Lodel. Hi, Edward.
Hi, Matt. Good to be here again.
Yeah, again, exactly. You're a quite a well, not common, but quite a frequent guest here. But still, there may be some people who don't recognize you. Maybe they are here for the first time. Could you please just quickly introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Edward Adel, Gura Trucks English solicitor. And so, amongst other things, but in terms of today, we'll be talking about the UK cases, which I run along with Sarah Donahue, our other English lawyer.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, as what already said, we'll be talking about some cases from England, especially those regarding clandestine penalties. Before we jump into that, because it's a well, it's a temporary issue with change in law and all that. But before we delve into that in detail, could you please explain to us, which I assume most of us already know, but still, so that we're all on the same page, who are clandestines?
Okay, so that's a good starting point. So a clandestine is really anybody who tries to hide in this context, normally in lorries. When these lorries enter the UK, and they're trying to avoid the normal immigration controls, so they're trying to illegally uh, enter into the UK. And as I say, yeah, this normally tends to be hidden in or on top of or underneath trucks.
Okay. What countries they mainly come from in the context of the United Kingdom?
So here, this can really vary quite a lot. I suppose perhaps lots are coming from the Middle East, maybe perhaps from Eastern Europe a little bit, and also maybe from north of Africa. They might also be other immigrants that have been living in Europe for a while but would like to enter the UK, particularly as the UK is outside of Schengen. It's a little bit more complicated to get in and get visas. So um, yeah, to be honest, they're really coming from all over. And when we do have cases, the authorities don't really, yeah, they don't distinguish or discriminate against people from they're all just described as clandestine entrants, so that they're not given, oh, this clandestine entrance from this country, this one's from this country. They're just referred to a generic clandestine entrance.
Okay. So with that general explanation out of hand, we can jump straight to our today's topic. So, from the 13th of February this year, the law on clandestine penalties entrance is changing, and there are new penalties for not securing a vehicle and huge penalty increases. Now, this has two most important sections. First of which is is section 31st A regarding the failure to secure a goods vehicle. Could you please explain what is this about?
Yep. Okay. So just before we jump in, as you said, the most important thing here, I think, is when. And hopefully you can all see the presentation that I've put up. So when this comes into force on the 13th of February, so we've got a little bit less than 2 weeks before this comes into force. So not a huge amount of time, and the two changes. It's existing legislation, the Immigration and Asylum Act, which has been amended and now will provide for two penalties. The first one is failing to secure a goods vehicle, which, as Matt said, is Section 31A. What does this mean, more or less? This is by not securing your truck by uh, yeah, by lock, seal, or other security device, effectively leaving your vehicle open that anyone can enter freely because it's not secured. Uh, and the second penalty will be for carrying clandestine entrant. And here, this is the existing penalty, which has been, if you like, has been a penalty since 1999. The changes in the amount of the maximum penalty. Um, and just before I jump into the failing to secure a goods vehicle, um, as before, both for failing to secure a goods vehicle and for carrying clandestine entrance. The responsible people for penalties will be two parties. The first party will be the driver, and the second will normally be the transport company. But yeah, it could also be the vehicle owner or hirer, or the vehicle operators. And for the first time now, the UK authorities have recognised some scenarios where we have unaccompanied traders entering the UK. Okay, so moving on to the first completely new penalty. This is the failing to secure a goods vehicle. So here we have maximum penalty of 6,000 per responsible person per incident. So what does that mean in practice? That means 6,000 for the driver and most likely 6,000 for the company, which is at the moment the existing penalties for clandestines has a maximum penalty of 2,000. So this is here at 6,000.
Yeah,
It is quite a jump on that. However, as I said, this is the maximum penalty, and there are certain factors, which means that you might not start at the maximum penalty. So if you've had no previous cases in the last 5 years, the penalty will start at 1,500 for the driver and 1,500 for the company. If you've had one penalty in the last 5 years, it will start at 3,000 for the company and 3,000 for the driver. And then here talking about the maximum bracket, if you've had 2 or more penalties in the last 5 years, so really it's quite a long period of time they're using, you'll be at the maximum rate of 6,000 for the driver and 6,000 for the company. And why is it important that there's 2 penalties? Well, the most important practical implication here is that our clients, the transport companies, they will be responsible joint and severally for their driver penalties. So that means that a driver can pay his penalty himself. In practice, we don't often see that. But if he doesn't pay it, the company will be responsible for paying that. So here, the important takeaway for clients is that for failing to secure a goods vehicle, they could face a liability, a total maximum liability of £12,000 per incident, which is quite a large penalty. Here, let's say that's the bad news. Some of the not so bad news, or the slightly good news, is that there are some discounts available. So the first discount, which is going to be very important for our clients, is the civil penalty accreditation scheme. So if clients are members of the civil penalty accreditation scheme, or if they join the scheme, they will get a 50% discount in the fine values. So that's quite a substantial discount. And so here, our advice is to all clients, any clients considering going to the UK or going to the UK, really is that they must make sure they've got in place a proper system against clandestine entrance, and they must apply to the accreditation scheme. We also have another discount, which I won't get too much into the details because it's not something that we come across too regularly. But in a case where you have an unaccompanied trailer, in this instance, there would be no driver with the vehicle. So some clients are asking, well, how are they going to fine unaccompanied traders? And the responsible party will be the operator. And here, if the operator complies with the 5 requirements for responsible parties, they might be able to benefit from a 50% discount. And we'll look at the 5 areas of responsibility in a while. But for failing to secure a goods vehicle, there are these two discounts available, and the main ones our clients should be looking at is the 50% discount being on the accreditation scheme.
Oh, do you have something to add? Because I had the.
Yeah, if you haven't got any questions there, Matt, we can move on to the second penalty, which is the traditional carrying clandestine entrance, which is now going to be under Section 32 of the Immigration and Asylum Act.
Yeah, that was my question. Okay, so we can move to the Section 32, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. So here, this is something that clients have been used to. They should be a little bit familiar with the concept of these clandestine penalties. Here, the main change is that the maximum penalty has increased from 2,000 per responsible person per clandestine entrant. So it's increased from 2,000 to 10,000, which is, of course, an £8,000 jump. And And in terms of maximum penalty, previously the maximum penalty for the company and the driver in total was 4,000, and now we're looking at 20,000, so £16,000, which is probably not far off from 19,000 euros increase. So here, yeah, as I said, £10,000 is the new penalty per responsible person per clandestine entrance. So that means maximum penalty of 10,000 for the driver and 10,000 for the company, which is a colossal penalty just for carrying one clandestine. And we regularly, probably at least once a month, will have cases with 10 clandestine entrants. So if you have a case with 10 clandestine entrants, here just alone for carrying the clandestine entrants, you could be looking at a maximum penalty of 100,000 for the company and 100,000 for the driver, totaling £200,000. And of course, if you didn't secure your vehicle, you then have 12,000 penalty on top of that. So for carrying 10 clandestine entrants and for not securing your vehicle, you could face a maximum liability of £212,000, which is, could mean the end of business for many companies. All those numbers I've been talking about are maximum penalties, and there is a mechanism built in that they can apply a lower penalty. Here it's not quite. Previously we had 3 bans, now we're looking at 2 bans. So if you've had no previous cases in the last 5 years, the maximum penalty will start at 6,000, which is still a big penalty in itself. So the lowest point, if you carry one clandestine, that you'll be looking at will be 6,000 for the driver and 6,000 for the company. So 12,000 being the minimum liability you'll face. And if you've had one previous case, then it's jumped straight away to 10,000. And yeah, in our experience, operators who are going to the UK perhaps once a week over 5 years, it would be pretty unlikely that you didn't have a previous incident with clandestine. So this is really is going to be really important for clients going to the UK. And as before with failing to secure a vehicle, here we have the concept of joint and several liability, which means that the company is responsible for paying the driver penalty if he doesn't do it. And this can be particularly frustrating for companies if drivers are dismissed, perhaps because of an incident with clandestines, or if they just leave by their own free will and volition, and they're now working somewhere else. The company is still responsible, which is a frustration. Again, here we have some mechanisms for applying discounts. The first one is the accreditation scheme as before, which is a really important message for clients. So if you are on the accreditation scheme, you will get a 50% discount in the starting point of a fine. So this is, all clients really need to do that. And then to ensure that we can get as lower penalties as possible, perhaps cancelling the penalties, to get the extra 50% discount, clients will need to comply with the regulations. So they'll need to make sure that they have, for companies, the 5 areas of responsibility being training, written instructions, checklists, security devices, and monitoring. So if a client is on the accreditation scheme, they'll get the first 50% discount. And if we apply our effective system, being training, written instructions, security devices, checklist, and monitoring, we will get the extra 50%, and potentially we can cancel the penalties. So really, this is what this is our objective, that clients will be on the scheme, which they can do through us, and we can help them with this process. And the second part is that they apply their effective system properly, all the 5 elements, and they'll get the next 50%. So this is the best way that we can hope to cancel or ensure that we get as lower penalties as possible. Again, there is also a discount here for unaccompanied trailers if the operating company has complied as well. So if an operating company is sending unaccompanied trailers to the UK, if they're on the accreditation scheme, they can get the first 50% discount, and then if they comply with those rules, they'll get the extra 50%.
Okay. There is one thing you mentioned because that was what I found quite interesting. So before we jump to the how the process of registration to the accreditation scheme looks like in detail, you mentioned that one thing that surprised me that those clandestine entries and all that it's really frequent. And how does this look for the time being? Is it like what is the frequency, and is it really this common?
So we have seen. So I've been doing these cases for coming up to 10 years now, and over that time we have seen some patterns. I would say probably at the moment the number of clandestine entrants which are entering vehicles is smaller than it has been in the past. So in the past, for example, I think the record case I've had of clandestines has been 38 clandestines, and in the past it wasn't uncommon to have cases with 10, 15, 20 clandestines, particularly around the time there was the jungle in Calais, and these sort of refugee camps were building up, principally around Calais, Coquel, and in Dunkirk as well, in the north of France. And I think there was even in Spain, in Santander, I think there was also a camp of refugees there. So in the past, there were definitely more clandestines getting into the vehicles. We haven't really seen a drop in the number of cases, but as I say, it's much more common now that we have cases with 3 clandestines, 2 clandestines, 1 clandestine. So yeah, the takeaway, the good news for clients is, although I think the frequency of clandestines entering the vehicles is has been constant over the last 10 years, the number of clandestines breaking in is fewer. And so that the implication of that for clients is that because the penalty system is based, whatever penalty they use, they arrive at, this is times by the number of clandestines. So if they say before you had a liability of 2,000, if there were 3 clandestines, then it would be 6,000. And obviously, if you only get 1 clandestine, then it's a much smaller amount. So I think the fines are smaller for clients, which is good news.
Okay. Just a quick question. Is there any reason that can be singled out for the fact that there is a much smaller number of those clandestine entries, or not really? Is it just so happened that the immigration wave has slowed down and yeah.
Perhaps perhaps the war in the Middle East might have been a cause. It might be that happens with people have suggested it might happen again with the war in Russia. I'm not too sure. I have heard of some immigration from, let's say, from Eastern Europe, but not to the same extent as from the Middle East or North Africa. I think one of the main reasons why the UK is doing this now is because to remove a clandestine entrance from the UK has a cost of over £50,000, and the UK authorities are frustrated that many transport companies aren't taking seriously their responsibilities here and aren't securing their vehicles, and so it's very expensive for the government to remove clandestine entrance, which of course isn't really fair for many of our clients, and some of them will not have an effective system but will pass through. At the ports, they have these 3D sensors, or they have various scanning devices who can find people inside with heat detection systems. And so a company might not have any effective system against clandestines, but each time they arrive at the port, they pass through these scanners. And because they've passed through the scanners, they will find the people inside. So effectively, they have done, well, the finding of these people is largely down to them. But because they don't have an effective system in place, they will later get a big fine, which isn't completely fair, but unfortunately is the law. And I think as well this year they're also looking, as a fallout of Brexit, both Europe and the UK will be putting in sort of new visa requirements of taking biometric data from drivers and people crossing the borders. So the implications of this will mean that it'll be slower to cross the border, there'll be longer queues, and ultimately trucks being stationary or moving in slow traffic means that they're vulnerable to clandestine entrance. So this is also potentially a protection mechanism against those measures. But if I might, Matt, I'm just going to continue a little bit with, there is another, these penalties we have discussed are huge. And one of the existing ways we could reduce penalties also is that any penalty imposed has to be proportionate to the financial means available to a company. So for the driver penalties, if a driver receives a penalty of £50,000, there's not really much likelihood of him paying. So normally we are able to present limited financial means and have that penalty reduced. To do this, we need the last 3 months pay slips or the driver income prior to the incident. And so this is normally done through pay slips or bank statements. So we do have this option for drivers. And for the first time, Border Force has published or built into legislation a mechanism to do the same for companies. So here we can actually see that they've divided the reduction is aimed at micro to medium companies. So if you have a turnover or a balance sheet in these numbers around the 2 million, 10 million, and then 43 to 50 million, you can also get a discount in the value of the penalty. So this is also something that will be applying on a daily basis. For companies, it's a little bit more difficult. We'll need to submit balance sheets or statements of fact signed off by directors, and they'll need to be, if they're not in English, they'll need to be translated with a certified translator. So companies will have to show their profit and loss to Border Force, and sometimes companies are not particularly fond of doing that, and that'll also have to be translated. But this is something of interest for us, and we will be applying it.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's important that you mentioned about those discounts and all that, because a £50,000 fine is something that can easily close down a smaller transport company, especially if it's from abroad. For example, from Poland, where £50,000 is a crazy amount, let alone about the driver. So can be really expected from the driver, but he will come up with a £50,000. Okay. So. We had that out of the way, so now we can jump to the accreditation scheme, which we already talked a little about, but now we're going to delve into detail. So there are some responsibilities that both drivers and the companies have to comply with in order to be registered for the accreditation scheme.
Yep, so I think tied into what you're saying and almost taking a little step back, before I spoke about a potential discount for companies complying with the legislation. So I think I'll just talk briefly about the preventive measures, which are set out in the carrier liability regulation and the Border Force Code of Practice. So effectively, there are 5 responsibilities for companies and 3 for drivers. So companies must, which I did touch upon before, must have training on clandestine entrance and how to secure their vehicle. This training must be regular and ongoing. So normally we're seeing training when a driver starts with a company, then he should be on a regular cycle, so training every 6 to 12 months. And also we would expect to see retraining in the event of an incident. Companies need to provide written instructions on clandestines and how to secure their vehicle. These written instructions need to be carried by the driver on the vehicle and shown to Border Force officers in the event of an incident. This is really important. Companies need to provide security devices. For example, if it's a refrigerated unit, then this might be through a padlock and seal. If it's a soft-sided vehicle, then this would most likely be through a tier cable or security cable, padlock and seals. Checklists, vehicle security checklists need to be provided to drivers, and through this, drivers will record the checks that they make to their vehicle, checking for clandestine entrance during the vehicles. So here the idea is before and during loading, the driver checks the vehicles to ensure himself that there are no unauthorized persons inside the vehicle. and to check that the vehicle security is intact, that there's nothing, there's no cuts on the side if it's a soft-sided vehicle that somebody could get into, so that the vehicle is secure and fit for purpose for transportation. Then after each stop made during the journey, the driver has to make these same checks whenever he leaves the vehicle or whenever he takes his rests or his daily pauses. And the fifth element is and the link between the fourth and the fifth element is that when drivers finish their journeys, they need to return their checklist to the company, and the company needs to monitor these checklists and monitor the system in general it has against clandestine entrants. So it needs to review these checklists. If it knows a driver has made a transportation and during that journey there were 6 stops, if we only have 2 stops on the checklist, the company is expected to, because it's monitoring its system, it's expected to say to the driver, why haven't you recorded all the check? Or first of all, did you make checks during every stop? If not, then why not? And did you make more checks? And these need to be recorded on the checklist. So they need to check that drivers are using the checklist properly and recording all the checks that they make. A common question that companies will say to us is, look, we can have this whole system, but ultimately we're not on the road with drivers. So what can we do to ensure that they discharge their duties and that they carry out these tasks? So if a driver doesn't do any of his responsibilities, companies will need to first of all identify the driver isn't complying with the company system and their training, and potentially record this in a disciplinary, perhaps a written warning. A written warning to a driver that he's not filling out his checklist or that he didn't show his written instructions to border force officers after an incident. So recording this through an HR disciplinary procedure. This way the company can show that they're taking effective measures. And secondly, a driver should be trained until he understands. So if a driver doesn't fill out his checklist, if you discipline him and you give him training, if he does it again, then he needs to have the same thing, a second warning, and to be retrained until he understands that he has to fill out these checklists after each stop. And this is the only way that companies can avoid liability. So these are the other 5 responsibilities of the companies, which is training, written instructions, security devices, checklist, and monitoring. And drivers have 3 areas of responsibility. They need to secure their vehicles with security devices. So we said before that companies will give security devices. Drivers then need to make sure that they're using these on their vehicle, and companies will also have to give not just the exact number of security devices, they'll need to give spare devices, because let's say if on a journey clandestines cut your padlock and enter your vehicle, you'll need at least 1 spare lock to secure your vehicle after that entry. So drivers will have to secure, and they'll need to have spare devices available to them. Drivers have to check the vehicle for any signs of clandestine entrance or tampering or unauthorized access. And these checks they make must be recorded on a checklist throughout the journey. So effectively, they need to check their vehicle and make sure these checks are recorded on a checklist. So these are the company and driver responsibilities. So if a company is on the accreditation scheme, if it has an incident, it will benefit from the first 50% of the discount, and then the second 50% will be based on the application of these 5 and 3 points, the 5 points for the companies and the 3 points for the drivers. So if they apply these and they're accredited, then we have a chance of cancelling penalties.
Okay. Just a quick question. If the company is not accredited, I mean, if it's not on the accreditation scheme, but it is quite obvious and it can be proven that the company won't be able to pay this large fine, is there any chance for a discount, or does it have to be paid and there is no chance for a discount if it's not on the accreditation scheme?
A company can still get a discount, but it's still, if a company does that, first of all, it depends on the financial performance of a company. So if a company is reasonably profitable, there's a chance that it can pay a fairly sizable penalty. So this type of defense will only work if a company really doesn't have much meat, if it's really sort of working on the line. If it's really struggling to pay its bills, then this can be used as a defense. But at best case scenario, this is only going to give them a 75% discount. So really, if you get a penalty of, yeah, I don't know, if you say 100,000, you're still going to have to pay 25,000 at best case scenario, which is still pretty
Okay.
crippling. So whilst this is a mechanism we will explore and use with clients, I think it's much safer that if you're making regular trips to the UK, which is actually this next slide, and it's the conclusion of what we've been talking about, is that all clients making trips to the UK must implement a compliant system. Really, that I think you're risking too much, as you just said, Matt. If you're not on the accreditation scheme and you don't really have a proper system, you're still going to get a penalty, and so you're risking too much. And so the most risk-averse approach would be to ensure you have a compliant system against clandestine entrance and for securing your vehicles. And secondly, that the drivers and the company apply this. It's not just, and this is something we see quite regularly, that companies will, working with us, or maybe they'll develop a system, or they'll take some template documents and they'll have a system in place, but then they're not applying it going forward. So perhaps each time they have a case, they'll work to get their documentation in order, and then they'll forget about it again for the next 6 months until they get another case. So what's important is in between those cases and effectively going forward is that they implement a compliance system and they apply this and monitor this going forward on a daily basis. So really the continued application and monitoring is just as important as having a compliance system. And secondly, yeah, I think that another fundamental here is that companies must apply to a joint accreditation scheme. And again, here, it's not just joining the accreditation scheme. It's the continued use and maintenance of the system. And around this, there's two things really that I want to say. It is more difficult to join the accreditation scheme than sometimes we have clients who think they can just fill in some templates and this will get them accredited, or they fill out the questionnaire. It's a lot more complicated than that, and clients really do need to implement a system that's tailored to them. So we have some clients where 3 or 4 times their applications have been rejected because even though they have a good system, their drivers still aren't applying it properly. So where these systems aren't being applied, Border Force won't let companies onto the accreditation scheme. So this is one thing. Sometimes we get clients who think, I'll just fill out a questionnaire and fill out some documents and that's it. Actually, no, you need to invest some time in understanding the process, in implementing this into your company to make sure that it's working on in a daily basis, and that you're continuing to monitor it. The second point is, if you don't, if you do get onto the accreditation scheme and you're not continually monitoring it, and your drivers aren't using it properly, there's a risk of expulsion. So we have seen clients for non-compliance who do get kicked off. So again, here, for example, if the company to get on the accreditation scheme has showed that it has a training policy and that drivers have written instructions, they carry them on their vehicles. If you have an incident and a driver says that the last time he was trained was 3 years ago or 5 years ago, and that he doesn't have his written instructions, this is completely against the system that you had to present to get on board. So Border Force will, in these moments of suspicions, either they'll write to make an investigation into the company, or will expel a company from the accreditation list. So here, for both of these things, it's not just a case of implementing a system or joining the accreditation scheme. There is the ongoing job of applying it and monitoring it and maintaining it. So there is this concept of ongoing obligations as well.
Okay. Well, as you can see on the screen, we have arrived at our conclusion, but there is one more thing. So, what GuruTrack can actually do for you? So, our solution. So, Edward, what can GuruTrack do for our clients? What is our solution?
Yeah. So of those two conclusions, one is implementing a system, so we can help clients implement a compliance system against clandestines and for securing their vehicles, and we can help clients get onto the accreditation scheme. So let's say that the package for the accreditation scheme, which we offer clients, which will encompass as well the idea of of implementing an effective system. The first thing we do is we audit the current system, or we help clients put in place an effective compliance system. The first step in this process is the clients will fill out a compliance questionnaire, which will ask lots of questions about what practices and procedures they have in place for driver training, if any, security devices, checklists, monitoring, written instructions, all these type of questions, what policies they have, if anything, also a little bit about their business, how many drivers they have, how many vehicles, which ports they enter to get into the UK. Lots of information here. So we will review all that information, and then we will know if we're really at an early stage and we have to help a client implement a compliance system, or if we just need to make changes to their existing system. Either way, we'll help them make it a compliant system. So working with our clients, we'll advise on changes and improvements to make sure that they're compliant with the UK standards. And here we have a wide range of templates which we've used over a number of years, but which have been updated for these new changes. And these are available in most European languages. Here, as I say, would like to stress that it's not just a case of filling out templates. Clients really here have an opportunity to work with us and to make something that is tailored to the company. So if a company has certain particular needs, then yeah, we need to make sure these are drafted into the documents. If written instructions talk about refrigerated vehicles and soft-sided vehicles, but the company only uses refrigerated vehicles, really we don't need any references in the written instructions to soft-sided vehicles. So we can, or if a company is also using additional security devices like cameras, dashboard cameras, we can also build these things into their documentation. We can also help companies develop, if they would like, sort of disciplinary, a first written warning for non-compliance and a second written warning for non-compliance. We can help companies develop these documents. So once we're happy that the system is compliant, we will then present the paperwork to get the company registered on the accreditation scheme. As I say, that's here clients are contracting the full package. So even if a first application isn't successful, we can apply again. If your application isn't successful, there's no limit on the number of times that you can apply. So we will apply again and again until the company gets registered. And then once accepted, there is this concept of ongoing support and maintenance. So we will also continue to support the system, including document updates and help with questions on ongoing training obligations and any changes to the system, or if they have any issues arising from incidents, we can support the clients here. So there is this ongoing nature as well. It's not just, we won't just get clients registered and then have nothing to do with them, because clients, as I said, they can get expelled if they're not compliant. So we will continue supporting them going forward. And yeah, that is our solution, if you like.
Yeah, and well, I guess because I see there are no questions on the chat, so I assume we exhausted the topic, and I'm glad that everything is clear. So, Edward, do you have anything to add?
I don't. So I think if well, hopefully we'll be making a recording of this session. So if any clients weren't able to watch it, or for commercials, I think they'll be able to send a link of this video to clients, so they can watch it at a later date. And then secondly, I would just encourage anyone interested in this, or anyone making transportation to the UK, to get in touch with their commercial, or they can respond to the newsletters that we've sent on this, and we'll then get in touch to advise on the next steps and the costs. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Okay. So just as Edward said, don't be afraid to ask questions and ask us everything. I mean, us, not me. I just stream here, but ask your commercials and yeah. There is a question. Okay. Actually, so I'm gonna keep you here for a moment, Edward.
Okay.
Do we have any idea of the level of violations?
Of the level of the violations. Um, I don't know if this question, when they say violations, do they mean
I assume
the
it's about.
the amount of their penalties, or how many cases, incidents that somebody might have?
I'm
I
wondering that.
think if there's an incident with clandestines from the 13th of February,
Oh yeah,
they
a
will
number
apply.
of illegal immigrants. That's the question. So
Um,
about any incidents.
so the number. So in both cases, the first for failing to secure a vehicle here, this has nothing to do with the number of clandestine entrants, so this won't be applicable here. This is a penalty that's per incident if you don't secure your vehicle. And then secondly, for the clandestine entrants, um, the penalty that they impose, so that the maximum liability of 10,000 for the driver and 10,000 for the company, this is multiplied by the number of clandestines. So this just depends on your luck on the day. Yeah, let's say just this week we have one case with 3 clandestines, another case with 1 clandestine, another case with 5 clandestines. It just depends on the day, the number of clandestine entrants that could get into your vehicle. But as I was saying before, the maximum I've seen is above 30. But at the moment, the numbers tend to be, I would say, between 1 to 10 is the average number of clandestines. So whatever penalty you get, this, let's say 20,000 total liability for the company, will be times or multiplied by the number of clandestines. So if you have here a liability of let's say a total liability of 20,000, this will be times by 1 if there's 1 clandestine, by 3 if there's 3 clandestines. So if you have 3 clandestines, the total liability is 60,000. If you have 5 clandestines, the total liability would be 100,000. So this is the way it's working. 10 clandestines would be 200,000. I don't know if that answers the question.
I do hope it does. And yeah,
And if it doesn't, they can always write in
yeah,
to
of
us.
course. You can always put a complaint. Okay, yeah. Yeah, we received a thanks, so I assume this does answer the question. And yeah, and with that, we're wrapping up. There are no more questions. So I do hope everything is clear. I do hope we exhausted that topic. And so thank you, Edward, for being here today with us.
A
I
pleasure.
assume you will meet in the future because you are a frequent guest here on Realverse. And yeah, that's everything for today. Thank you so much
Yeah, great.
for being here. Thanks also to our viewers for watching us. And that is it. Remember, you can always ask questions. And yeah, okay. So that's it for today. Thank you so much, Edward.
Yeah,
Thank you so
thanks,
much
Matt,
for
and thanks to all the viewers. Okay, bye-bye.
bye. Thank you. And
Bye-bye.
we're seeing each other. I mean, me and the viewers, obviously, we're seeing each other on Monday. Thank you and goodbye.